He smirked across the conference table, that familiar, arrogant glint in his eyes. "If you think you're that valuable, Maya, then leave. Let's see how far you get without us." Laughter echoed around the room, polite, nervous, but real enough to slice through me. My hands clenched under the table, nails digging into my palms. He thought I wouldn't dare. He thought I was too loyal, too scared to walk away from the empire I helped him build. He was wrong. For 5 years, I had been the quiet architect behind every patent that fueled their billion-dollar valuation. The one who stayed up till 3 a.m. to fix failed prototypes. The one who rewrote their disaster reports so investors wouldn't panic. The one who turned their chaos into credibility. And yet here I was, being mocked by the man who signed my paychecks. That day didn't feel like the end of a job. It felt like the beginning of a reckoning. As the meeting ended, he brushed past me, whispering, "You're just a name on a payroll. Maya, don't forget who owns your work." I watched him walk away, calm, smug, certain that I'd swallow the insult like I always did. But something inside me had shifted. It wasn't anger this time. It was something colder, sharper. The quiet kind of fury that doesn't explode. It calculates. I spent the rest of the day in silence, while everyone else celebrated the new product launch, the one I had practically designed single-handedly. I stared at the lab's glass walls and realized how fragile their entire illusion really was. Every wire, every formula, every design patent was traceable to me. My name, my mind, my signature in the metadata of every document they thought they owned. And then it hit me. I didn't need to fight them. I didn't need to yell, threaten, or beg for respect. All I had to do was leave, but not empty-handed. The truth was, months ago, during the chaos of patent filing season, I had discovered something and overlooked clause buried deep in the legal agreement between the company and our research partners. It stated that any invention created under independent conceptual work remained the intellectual property of the originating researcher, not the company. And every major breakthrough in our $450 million patent originated from my notebooks, my files, my mind. He didn't know that yet. As I packed up my desk that night, the office felt unnervingly still. My ID badge lay on the table, and for the first time, I felt free. Not because I was leaving, but because I finally understood the game I was about to play. When I stepped into the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. Tired, yes, but no longer afraid. He had dared me to leave, and I intended to show him what that dare would cost. The next morning, I filed my resignation through the company portal. Short, polite, and coldly professional, but attached to it, hidden behind a routine HR copy, was a quiet bombshell. A notice of intent to transfer intellectual ownership under the legal clause they'd ignored. By the time he opened the email, the patent office had already updated its provisional record. The 450 million formula, the crown jewel of his empire, no longer belonged to his corporation. It belonged to me. That was the day the silence turned deadly for his career. He had no idea yet that his careless dare had just cost him everything he'd built. And as for me, I was just getting started. The first time I walked into that company, I was just a junior research analyst, invisible, underpaid, and dangerously ambitious, the kind of woman they liked having around. Smart enough to fix their problems, quiet enough not to take credit. Back then, the company was struggling to stay afloat. Our department, Advanced Materials, was their last hope. They wanted innovation that could save their collapsing contracts. I was the only one who didn't treat that as a job. To me, it was a challenge. I saw potential in things no one else noticed. While my boss, Adrian Cole, spent nights schmoozing investors, I spent mine alone in the lab, running simulations, rewriting flawed code, improving formulas everyone else had given up on. And one night, in that half-lit room filled with the hum of machines, it happened. The breakthrough, a composite algorithm that could reduce production costs by 40% without compromising durability. The kind of discovery that would change entire industries. I documented everything, wrote every line of code, every calculation, with my initials at the footer. When the board saw the first test results, they acted like Adrian had performed a miracle. I stood in the background as he presented my work, his voice steady and confident, saying phrases like "our team" and "our innovation." He never mentioned my name, not once. At first I didn't care. Recognition was overrated. Or at least that's what I told myself. I was there to build something meaningful, not to bask in applause. But over time, the small cuts became deep wounds, bonuses I never received, promotions that bypassed me, and then the public launch where my design patent was filed, under his name. I confronted him once quietly. He smiled, handed me a glass of champagne, and said, "You're brilliant, Maya. But brilliance needs a face the world trusts. Let me be that face." And I let him. For too long. Still, I kept building. Every upgrade, every adjustment to the formula made it stronger. What he didn't realize was that I had begun saving copies, encrypted and time-stamped, with independent development notes logged on my personal cloud. Not out of paranoia, out of self-preservation. Somewhere deep down, I think I knew this day would come. Adrian's arrogance grew with every investor meeting. He started treating me like an accessory to his genius, someone who existed to make him look good. And when his ego finally collided with his carelessness, he made his biggest mistake. He dared me to leave. That single sentence, that smug, careless challenge, turned my silence into strategy. By the time my resignation hit HR's inbox, I had already consulted a patent attorney. She reviewed everything, every note, every timestamp, every formula signature. Her conclusion was simple. "You're the true inventor." I still remember her tone when she said it. Calm, factual, yet heavy with power. "Maya, if your documentation checks out, that patent doesn't belong to the company. It belongs to you." That night, I sat on my apartment floor surrounded by folders, notes, and memory drives, realizing that the empire I had built for them was legally mine. But this wasn't about money. Not anymore. This was about truth. The kind that doesn't need to scream to be heard. I knew Adrian would retaliate the moment he realized what I'd done. And I was ready for that. What he didn't know was that every corner he thought I'd backed into, I had designed myself, because while he spent his years building his image, I spent mine building the system that could destroy it. And soon he was going to learn that the quiet ones, the ones they overlook, underestimate, and dismiss, are the ones who write the final chapter. The email came faster than I expected. Subject line, urgent, unauthorized claim notice. Adrian didn't even wait a full day before sending his fury through legal channels. His tone was formal, so for now, but I could feel the venom behind every word. He accused me of breaching confidentiality, of intentionally misrepresenting ownership. The letter ended with the classic threat, "Return all company property immediately, or face legal action." I smiled. It was exactly what I'd prepared for. See, I knew Adrian. He was predictable. Every move he made came from ego, not logic. He couldn't stand the thought of someone, especially a woman, he'd once dismissed, outsmarting him. So he'd react emotionally, aggressively, publicly, and that would be his first mistake. Before I responded, I made a few calls, one to my attorney, another to a contact at the National Patent Registry, an old friend who owed me a favor. Within hours, every trace of my ownership claim was locked, verified, and digitally notarized. My authorship wasn't just legal, it was undeniable. The next day, his assistant, a nervous intern named Claire, called me in tears. "Maya, he's losing it. He's in meetings nonstop. The board's furious." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then came the second letter, this time from the company's top legal firm. They demanded immediate withdrawal of my claim and offered a settlement to make the situation go away quietly. Their offer? $75,000. I laughed out loud. $75,000 for a patent valued at $450 million. That was Adrian's arrogance distilled into a single number. His belief that I'd take the easy way out, that I'd fold. So I replied with one sentence. "Ownership isn't for sale." Within hours, the corporate storm began. Adrian started leaking whispers to investors, calling me unstable, difficult, and disloyal. He had always been a master manipulator, spinning stories until the truth bent around him. But this time I had documentation. I released a quiet press statement. Nothing dramatic, just a factual disclosure through my attorney that clarified my authorship of the research. No accusations, no emotional appeal. Just dates, data, and signatures. And that's when everything changed. Investors panicked. Shareholders started demanding clarity. The stock price wobbled. Adrian called for an emergency board meeting to address misinformation. But the damage was done. For the first time, the board saw the possibility that their golden patent, their billion-dollar promise, might not belong to them after all. I'd hit him where it hurt most. Uncertainty. I stayed silent through it all. Every email from him went unanswered. Every threat ignored, because silence, I had learned, was louder than anger. Then came his final card, the one he thought would break me. Late one evening, a courier arrived at my apartment. Inside was a thick envelope stamped, "Cease and desist." Attached was a note in his handwriting. "You can't win this, Maya. You're out of your depth. Walk away before it destroys you." For a moment, I almost laughed. The irony of it all. The man who dared me to leave now begging me to stop walking. But it was too late. Because by then, I wasn't fighting for revenge anymore. I was fighting for every woman who'd ever built something, only to watch a man take credit for it. Every quiet genius who'd been told they were replaceable. Every underdog who'd stayed silent because they didn't think they had power. I wasn't going to destroy him with rage. I was going to destroy him with paperwork. And soon, the very patent that had made him powerful would become the instrument of his fall. The empire was trembling, and I was just getting started. 2 weeks later, I got the call I'd been expecting, but not from Adrian. It was from one of the board directors, a woman named Evelyn Pierce. I remembered her from countless meetings, sharp, poised, and always 2 steps ahead of everyone in the room. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Maya," she said, "I need to understand what's happening. Adrian claims you've breached confidentiality, but his story doesn't add up." There it was, the first crack in his fortress. I agreed to meet her, but on neutral ground. A quiet cafe downtown, far from their marble offices and prying eyes. When she arrived, she wasn't wearing her usual confidence. Instead, she looked tense, guarded. She slid a folder across the table. "He's been covering something up. There are inconsistencies in the patent filings. 2 versions. 2 signatures. One with your name hidden under a sublayer in the metadata." "Did you know about this?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I saw it months ago." Evelyn sighed, her tone softening. "He told the board the system glitched. But I checked. It didn't. He deliberately overwrote your authorship before filing. That moment confirmed everything I had suspected. Adrian hadn't just taken credit. He had forged my ownership out of existence. A calculated betrayal disguised as corporate necessity. The woman across from me looked at me with something I hadn't seen from anyone in that company before. "Respect. You could sue for fraud, Maya. You'd win." I smiled faintly. "Oh, I plan to. But not yet." Because what Evelyn didn't know was that I had something bigger in motion. Something that would make a lawsuit look like a mercy. I had spent years learning the company's systems, their procedures, their loopholes. And in that time, I'd discovered one particular clause, buried deep in their corporate charter, that required full disclosure of patent ownership during any merger or funding round. If proven false, it would trigger automatic contract termination and forfeiture of licensing rights. And guess what? Adrian was about to finalize a major international licensing deal, one worth over $450 million. All I had to do was wait. 3 days later, the betrayal came full circle. I received a friendly email from an unfamiliar law firm, apparently independent mediators. They wanted to resolve the ownership issue amicably. When I checked their registration, I realized they were hired by Adrian, disguised as third-party negotiators to trick me into signing a release form. It was a trap, a legal one. The attached document was worded carefully. If I signed, I'd unknowingly assign all current and future rights of the invention back to the company. For mutual convenience, they thought I wouldn't read the fine print. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it straight to my attorney and attached the metadata proof Evelyn had shown me. She called me the next morning, voice shaking with excitement. "Maya, this is a smoking gun. They altered federal patent records. That's felony-level fraud." Adrian had finally crossed the line from arrogance to criminality. I knew what would come next. Panic, desperation, damage control. And I wanted every bit of it to unfold in public. That afternoon, I drafted one final email, addressed to the entire board. For years, I worked in silence while others took credit. I was loyal when I should have been cautious, but I won't be silent anymore. The truth about Patent 1789C belongs in the light. Attached are documents proving deliberate alteration of authorship. I'll let integrity decide what happens next. No threats, no demands. Just truth. Undeniable, time-stamped truth. Within hours, the board's internal chat exploded. Evelyn texted me privately. "He's cornered. He's losing control." And for the first time since this war began, I felt peace. Adrian's betrayal had turned me into something he never expected. His equal. His rival. His reckoning. He once told me that emotions had no place in business, but he forgot the one emotion that drives revolutions. Justice. And mine was just beginning. The morning after I sent that email, silence swept through the company. Not the usual kind. Not the busy day silence, but the kind that carries weight. The kind that means something is breaking. I didn't hear from Adrian. Not a call, not a message, but I didn't need to. I could feel the chaos through the market itself. The company's shares had begun to slip. The media hadn't caught on yet, but inside, I knew the storm was building. That's when I decided it was time to set the final stage of my plan. The one I'd been building in secret long before I ever walked out of that office. It started months before my resignation, when I discovered that obscure clause in their corporate bylaws, the integrity verification clause. It required that all intellectual property, under active licensing negotiations, be free of legal disputes. If any ownership claim surfaced during the negotiation window, the deal would automatically suspend until the claim was resolved, and if it wasn't cleared within 60 days, the deal would self-terminate. The best part, no one could override it, not even the CEO. When I realized what that meant, I knew I had found my weapon. So the day I filed my resignation, I had quietly submitted a notice of pending ownership dispute to the International Trade Commission. It wasn't public, just a procedural filing to protect my rights. But that little document was enough to freeze any licensing deal in progress. And now that deal, the $450 million one Adrian had been courting for nearly a year, was about to collapse. Still, I didn't want him to just lose money. I wanted him to watch the empire he built on lies crumble piece by piece, in front of the very people he had fooled. So I called Evelyn. She answered on the first ring. "He's in a meltdown, Maya. The investors are calling every hour." I smiled. Good. They should know who they're trusting. Then I gave her what she didn't know she needed, the paper trail. I sent her everything. The original research logs, the time-stamped code, the internal memos showing how Adrian ordered the metadata edits. "This isn't just mismanagement," I told her. "It's fraud." She didn't hesitate. Within 48 hours, she scheduled an emergency board review. Under the pretense of compliance, verification, Adrian thought it was routine. He had no idea that the documents waiting for him in that boardroom were his own undoing. While he walked into that meeting wearing his favorite navy suit, the one he wore for every victory, I sat in a quiet cafe across town, sipping coffee and watching the live stock ticker. The price was dropping faster now. Investors were pulling out. Whispers of ownership conflict had begun leaking online. The timing was perfect. Just before the board meeting started, I released my final move, a public filing to the Global Patent Office. It was a formal reassignment notice, naming me as the original and primary inventor, with documentation attached. I didn't need to accuse anyone. The evidence spoke for itself. Within hours, the story broke. Headlines flooded every business site. Tech giant faces legal battle over $450 million patent ownership. Former employee claims rights to breakthrough innovation. I could imagine Adrian's face as he read them. The panic, the disbelief, the sudden realization that the very loophole he once used to exploit me had now become the noose tightening around his neck. Evelyn called me after the meeting. Her voice was calm but edged with awe. "You didn't just expose him, Maya. You detonated the system." I laughed softly. "No, Evelyn. I just used their own rules." She paused. "The board's calling for an internal audit. Adrian's position isn't safe anymore." "Good," I said quietly. "It shouldn't be." The trap was complete. Every document, every patent, every contract he'd built was now under scrutiny. The $450 million deal had officially been suspended pending investigation. The investors who once idolized him were now demanding answers. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger anymore. The system was doing my revenge for me. The loophole I had discovered wasn't just legal. It was poetic. It didn't just take away his success. It turned his empire into a ticking time bomb, set to implode by his own arrogance. He had dared me to leave. He just didn't realize I would take the foundation with me. And as I watched the company's logo flash across the evening news, attached to words like fraud, inquiry, and ownership dispute, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of his downfall. The morning of the audit felt almost cinematic. I wasn't there in person, but I didn't have to be. I'd already played my part. The rest was just watching the dominoes fall. At 9 a.m., the boardroom lights at Helixian Industries flickered on. Cameras rolled. Recordings were mandatory for compliance purposes. I knew the setup. I'd sat in that same room countless times, right across from Adrian while he basked in fake glory, but this time, he was the one under the microscope. Evelyn had kept me updated. He thinks it's routine, she said the night before. He doesn't know we've seen everything. Perfect. The audit began with the external compliance team, 6 people in gray suits, led by a woman named Dr. Winters. She was clinical, cold, and impossible to intimidate. Exactly the kind of person who could strip Adrian's empire down to its bare bones. Mr. Cole, she began, flipping through the file. We've been asked to verify authorship records for patent 1789C. You filed this document under your name as lead innovator, correct? Adrian nodded smoothly. That's correct. The invention was a team effort, of course, but I was the project lead. Dr. Winters raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Because the embedded metadata, specifically, the version control logs, suggest otherwise. She pressed a button. The screen behind her lit up with a projection of the original file. My initials flashed in the corner of the screen. ML time-stamped months before. Adrian's first signature appeared. The room went silent. Evelyn later told me she could actually hear the sound of Adrian's breath catching. Dr. Winters continued unfazed. We've also uncovered records showing that the original author fields were manually altered, from Maya Lorne to Adrian Cole, approximately 12 hours before submission. Do you have an explanation? He stammered something about technical errors and clerical mix-ups, but it was too late. The evidence was irrefutable. Each click of Dr. Winters' remote brought up another file. Research logs, prototypes, draft submissions, all with my signature buried beneath layers of overwritten data. The board members looked like statues, silent, pale, watching their golden CEO unravel in real time. Then Evelyn spoke up. Her tone was calm but lethal. Mr. Cole, you assured us this patent was clear of dispute during licensing negotiations. Were you aware of Ms. Lorne's pending ownership claim? His voice cracked. She's lying, she's trying to sabotage us. But Dr. Winters cut him off. The claim was filed 30 days before the licensing contract. You signed the declaration after that date, meaning you knowingly misrepresented ownership. That was the kill shot. Adrian's jaw tightened. His charm, his greatest weapon, had finally failed him. The man who once controlled every narrative was now drowning in the truth. He'd buried. Evelyn told me later that she'd never seen him look so small. By noon, the audit report was finalized. Findings: fraudulent alteration of authorship records. Recommendation: immediate suspension of CEO pending legal review. Within hours, the board voted unanimously to remove him from active duty. When the press release hit the news, it didn't just ruin his image, it obliterated it. Headlines painted him as a fraud, an opportunist who built his success on stolen credit. The stock price nosedived another 18% that afternoon. My phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters, lawyers, old colleagues suddenly wanting to talk. I ignored them all. I didn't want fame. I didn't want interviews. I wanted silence, the kind that follows justice. That night, I stood on my balcony, looking over the city lights, remembering that smirk on his face the day he said, "If you think you're so valuable, leave." He never imagined I'd take the very heart of his empire with me. And yet that's exactly what I'd done. The patent was now officially under dispute, pending full ownership transfer to me. His empire was bleeding, the board was fractured, and the investors had fled. But I wasn't finished, not yet. There was still one last truth left to reveal. The part that would seal his downfall permanently, and make sure no one could ever rebuild what he destroyed. And I knew exactly how to deliver it. 2 weeks after Adrian's suspension, the company he once ruled was unrecognizable. The glass walls that once reflected his ego now echoed with whispers of betrayal and audits. I hadn't stepped foot inside since the day I left, but my presence lingered in every document, every screen, every trembling board member wondering how they never saw the truth. The patent was officially reassigned. The final ruling came in a single email from the international office. Primary inventorship, Maya Lorne. That was it. No fanfare, no confetti, just quiet vindication. The kind that settles deep in your chest and stays there. Adrian tried to reach out once through his lawyer. A settlement offer disguised as an apology. I deleted it without reading. Some debts can't be paid with money. Instead, I used my newfound ownership to do what I always wanted, build something. Ethical, transparent, my own research firm, one where innovation meant collaboration, not exploitation. Sometimes people ask if it was worth it. The fight, the sleepless nights, the scars left behind. I always smile and tell them the truth. It wasn't revenge that drove me. It was justice wearing silence like armor. Because when he dared me to leave, he thought he was taking away my power. He didn't realize he was handing it back to me. When the final court ruling came, I wasn't even there to hear it. I was at a small cafe overlooking the ocean, the same one I used to sit at during lunch breaks when my boss would remind me how replaceable I was. The irony was poetic. The same man who once told me I'd never make it on my own was now being forced to publicly apologize for stealing my invention. The same patent he mocked, the one he thought would die in the drawer, was now the cornerstone of an empire he no longer owned. Titan Dynamics shares plummeted within days. Investors pulled out, clients demanded refunds, and the board ousted him before the ink on the judgment even dried. His face, once on every tech magazine cover, vanished like a deleted file. The world moved on, except me. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just exhaled. Years of humiliation, gaslighting, and corporate arrogance finally dissolved into quiet justice. My new company wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption. We built things differently. Shared credit, transparent pay, real recognition. And maybe that was the real victory. Proving that brilliance doesn't need to be stolen to shine. But every now and then, when I see an old press photo of him online, I still remember the moment he smirked and said, "If you think you're that smart, walk away." So I did, and walking away became the loudest thing I ever did. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. Sometimes revenge isn't destruction, it's evolution. And sometimes the best way to win is to make them realize they trained the person who outgrew them. When the 450 million patent finally bore my name, I didn't feel triumphant, I felt free. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming what was stolen, respect, identity, and power. I sent one last message to my former boss. Just one line, "You dared me to leave. You never said I couldn't take the future with me." He never replied, but I didn't need him to, because his silence was the sweetest confirmation of all. And as the sunset burned gold across the horizon that evening, I realized the story wasn't about a stolen patent. It was about breaking free from the kind of people who think they own your dreams. This is Revenge Untold, where silence becomes power, and every betrayal finds its reckoning. Don't forget to subscribe.